listening to the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast. Hi, this is Shane Vander Hart. Welcome back to another episode of the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast, and happy Friday. We're taking a look again at Iowa House District 84. I had a conversation with another candidate today, Sheila Matheney, who's a Republican candidate in the four-way race in that House district. Before we get to my conversation with Sheila, first a word from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Brian Myers. When I needed a better life insurance plan, I found it with Travis Risvold of Modern Woodmen of America. When I first met Travis, he wasn't like some other life insurance agents that can be pushy and try to get you to buy something. Travis just made himself available to me. That was it. He told me to let him know if and when I needed anything, and he stayed in touch. When the day came and I did need to make some changes with my life insurance, Travis met with me and walked me through several options so I could make an informed decision. Ultimately, it was the best decision for my situation. So if you need a life insurance plan that makes sense for you, call my friend Travis Risvold with Modern Woodmen. His number is 515-883-0029. That's Travis Risvold with Modern Woodmen. He can help you find the life insurance you need. Call him at 515-883-0029.
At American Principles Project, we believe that human dignity should be at the heart of public policy. We work in all 50 states and in Washington, D.C. to promote life, religious freedom, local control over education, authentic economic progress for working Americans, and a return to constitutional principles such as federalism. Want to help American Principles Project? Visit our website today, AmericanPrinciplesProject.org. That's American Principles, PLES, project.org. Sign up for email updates. Help us out. We want to work with you. That's AmericanPrinciplesProject.org.
And I'm back. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Sheila Matheney, Republican candidate in Iowa House District 84. Hey, Sheila, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me on the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So the first question I ask any candidate, whether they're running for president or for county supervisor, why do you want to run? Or why are you running? I guess you are.
Why am I running? Well, I've always had an interest in politics, but never really thought that I would actually be the candidate. Dave Heaton is retiring out of this seat. I think he's been in the legislature for about 24 years, and I've known him for the past 16 years since living in Mount Pleasant. And I've worked with him quite a bit on funding issues and regulatory issues as part of him being the chairman of the HHS committee. Mm-hmm. So our background is in healthcare, and so that kind of got me interested a little bit. I knew that he was going to retire. He made that announcement in January, and the thought kind of crossed my mind, should I run? Should I not run? And in talking to a few people that have past legislative experience and some business people around that I knew, I got a lot of encouragement to run because of my history in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for about 25 years.
Okay.
We've owned a small business for the last 16 years. We've lived in several states. So I have a broad, I think, a lot of experience, a broad knowledge of several things. And I just think that, my proactive problem-solving skills and kind of common sense approach to things would make me, a good state representative. So that's really why I threw my hat in the ring.
Okay. You kind of your answer dovetailed in my next question, was just tell us a little bit about yourself. Anything you'd like to add to your previous answer?
So I was born and raised in Troy, Missouri. I spent a lot of my summers and weekends on my grandparents' farm, although that was 35 years ago, so that's been quite a while ago, but was exposed to a lot of good family values through that. I went to the University of Missouri-Columbia, and I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in health sciences.
Okay.
So from that, I got my certification as a speech language pathologist and practiced in the VA for a little bit, did some home health, hospitals, wound up in subacute care in Florida, where I just found out, that the elderly population was kind of, my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So from there, we ended up moving back to Iowa. My husband is from Mount Pleasant, Iowa, so we moved back here in 2002, and we came back and bought a small healthcare company, which at that time was a 62-bed nursing home and some independent living duplexes that were basically in bankruptcy.
Okay.
And so we purchased that building in 2002. As I said, I got my long-term care administrator's license, and we have been running that business ever since. We've grown that business to an assisted living. We added on an assisted living. We added on another 16 units. We purchased 16 units of independent living, and we just are opening June the 18th a brand new assisted living that has 19 units to it. So
all these in Mount Pleasant?
Everything is in Mount Pleasant, yes.
Okay, great. One of the things I like to talk about with candidates, because it's like the biggest part of the budget, 57% of this latest general fund budget consists of education, community college, Regents University, K-12 funding. A lot of people talk about local control in education, but I think that means different things to different people depending on your perspective of centralizing education. Mm-hmm. When you hear the phrase local control of education, what does that mean to you? What would that look ideally?
Well, I think a local control to a certain extent is always a positive thing. I do think that, there needs to be set standards and expectations of a community school district. But I think where they lose a lot of local control is in funding. And I think a lot of funding is mandated into certain pots and funds and that type of thing. And we saw that a few years ago here in Mount Pleasant, where there was money in this pot to do this certain project, but there's no money in this pot to do this certain project. So
right.
I think the major part for me of giving back local control is not every school district is cookie cutter. Not every school district is the same. And so, you have to trust your superintendent, your board of, your school board to make the right funding decisions. So in my mind, a better solution to that situation would be to fund the schools at X amount of dollars per year and let the schools and the board decide where those funds could go and how efficiently the school should be run and where those funds should be allocated within the district itself.
Just curious, you said schools should have standards, and you're talking about local control in the terms of school finance. I agree with you. School finance is a total mess.
Right.
Back when I was in school, we didn't have Iowa Core. We took Iowa Test of Basic Skills. Mm-hmm. And education in Iowa was, we were one of the top states in the nation. I'm wondering, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, how is centralizing standards, and maybe you don't believe this, but I'll let you address it. How does centralizing standards help boost education at the local level?
Well, I think there are a lot of people that are in Iowa going to stay in Iowa, but I think that we are a traveling society.
Sure.
Within the state, out of the state. And I think, what you're getting to with like Common Core standards, mm-hmm. Common Core sets certain standards. And I think that the expectation of school districts need to meet certain criteria that, so all children that go to a public school system in the state of Iowa on our level playing field, should they go, into secondary education. And so in my mind, it's a good thing that even if somebody's going to go to the school district next door.
Mm-hmm.
That one school district is teaching one thing, the other school district is teaching another thing, and the kid is, really behind. So I think a basic standard of education is fine.
Okay.
I do not agree with the Common Core philosophy of kids need to be taught a specific way. So, that all science is on the same track and all social studies is on the same track, as a basic generalization,
mm-hmm.
That we're all on the same page with that. But I do really have an issue with, math will be taught this way. There are some kids that have embraced the Common Core way of teaching math, and it fits in their brain and it works in their brain, and that's great. But there are also some kids and a lot of parents that are trying to help their kids,
right?
That are really good with the traditional way. And I think too, there really needs to be some options and some individualization within the school, within the classroom, on how those common standards are taught.
Okay, so if I want to hear you correctly, standards are good, but not necessarily Common Core.
You got, yeah. I would agree with that. Along with that, I am a huge proponent of the voucher program, of money following a child.
Okay.
I really think, along those lines. So I will tell you that my son is homeschooled.
Okay.
And one of the best things about homeschooling him was we did traditional math this year.
Okay. Great.
And so, I just think that is a really good example of, parents, when you go into school, you have the education piece, you have the socialization piece, and you have the safety piece.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are some parents that think that their kid is doing really well and thriving in the public school system under the Common Core. And that's great and wonderful if that's, what they're thinking that's best for their child.
I've yet to meet that parent. But
there are some people that want choice for their kid. And really, it's not about the institutions. The funding is about educating a child. And, I think it's the parent's prerogative to decide what is best for their child.
So you kind of read my mind. That was my next question, was regarding school choice. So there was an education savings account bill that was offered in the Iowa Senate, and the Iowa House. Didn't make it. Right. It didn't survive funnel. But if you were in the Iowa House this year, that would be a bill that you would have supported.
It would have been a bill I would support it. I think one of the biggest controversial things with that bill was whether students then that money is given to certain schools, private schools, parochial schools, homeschool. How do you know when your state dollars are paying for that these kids are actually getting educated?
Right.
And I think one of those controversial things was whether a kid should be tested. And I do believe that if state dollars are going to go into a private system, that there needs to be some standard by which that system is judged.
Right. Well, every version of the education savings grant program I've seen, well, this previous sessions, the bills that were offered actually wouldn't count for homeschooling. Homeschooling students wouldn't. You'd have to go to a private school. Also, or it was just eligible. In order to be eligible, the student had to either be an incoming kindergartner or have been in a public school for at least a year. So it was a little bit different. And even when bills that I've seen expand to include homeschooling, usually include competent private instruction, not independent private instruction. So you're a homeschooler, you're familiar with the difference between the two. So a little more, whether it's a portfolio or a supervisor or teacher or an assessment that, those parents, if they fell under the education savings grant program, they would have a little accountability that way.
And I'm also hearing from people that I had somebody take the position with me that, well, so your favoring, middle class and upper class children, that they're able to go to a private school or whatever. And I really just feel like that's the opposite. I am hearing from people that say, I would like to send my child to a private school. I would like to have a choice, but I cannot afford it. And so I have the opposite view of some people. I feel like it gives kids that would not be able to afford a different choice, a different educational choice. To me, you're giving them the level playing field. So just my take on it.
Sure. Shifting gears here, the fetal heartbeat bill was passed in the legislature. Actually, they just had a hearing in Iowa District Court, and both sides agreed to a temporary injunction because the attorneys representing the state just formally got the case 2 days ago, so they weren't ready to prepare a full-fledged defense of Iowa's heartbeat bill. Had you been in the legislature this year, is that a bill you would have supported?
Definitely would have supported that bill. In our forums, it's been one of those things that I said that I would compromise on a lot of things. That would be an example of something that my Christian values and beliefs tell me, that life begins at conception. That would be one of those things that I would not be able to compromise on. I think that the bill, sparks a lot of passion on both sides.
Sure.
And I get the uniqueness of being a female candidate running, and I get a lot of questions from other females of, don't you want to have control over your body? And I can't believe as a female that you would support this bill. And I just see it as, a moral and ethical belief of mine. When you believe life begins at conception, that's it. To me, there's other options, like, adoption and other avenues that I think aren't widely enough promoted.
Right.
And I know the other controversy is, Iowa's going to spend all this money in litigation, and it's never going to go forward. But, there has to be a first step for everything.
Yep.
I feel like Iowa's first in a lot of things. I think it's a great thing that this state is going to be first and a leader in that. And I really do think that it has a really good shot in the Supreme Court, which is probably where it's going. But there's just some things that are worth fighting for, and I think that somebody's got to do it. So I'm proud that the state did it.
Great, and actually, if anybody says they talks about taxpayer dollars, not a single taxpayer dollar is paying for the defense, since Thomas More Society is the.
I actually had heard that, but I hadn't really researched it a whole lot, so I wasn't really for sure.
Yep.
But I did hear that a lot of the litigation was going to be at private expense. So.
Yep.
Perfect.
So it kind of shoots a hole in that particular argument from those who are pro-abortion anyway. So.
Right.
And I don't want to assume, but I think I do assume that you also support defunding abortion providers of taxpayer money.
That I don't support?
That you do support defunding abortion providers?
Defunding. I thought
you said defunding.
Like,
let me be clear. I don't want to...
No, I do not. No, any way, shape, or form do I believe that taxpayer dollars need to go for that.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Good deal. Moving on, Governor Reynolds just signed the tax reform package. Does that tax reform package go far enough? And if not, what does an ideal tax reform package look like to you?
Well, I think the tax reform package is a good first start. I like the fact that, the state is going to do something to look at it and address it, because, income tax, our personal income tax is taxed at, the fifth highest in the nation. So definitely that needs a good look. I like the fact that it's phased in over periods of time, and that they have to meet certain revenue benchmarks before we go forward. So, one of the things that I think is really important for the government to do, if they're going to promise something, I think it's a good thing that they fund, if you're promising funding to XYZ person, provider, group, then I think that if they make that commitment, that funding needs to go forth. And going back into the legislature in January and saying, oh, well, we overshot our benchmark and we overspent, so we're going to start taking money back from different entities that we've promised it to, is clearly not the way to go. So I like, that they're going to make sure that their forecasting is correct prior to doing that.
Yeah.
I think? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying, having basically looking at what they're expecting is $8.3 billion in revenue by fiscal year 2022, which would basically account to being 4% growth in revenue each year leading up to that. Is that realistic?
I think it's going to be a tough mark. I do think had they maybe given the individuals a little bit deeper cut, or looked at corporations, coming in and getting a little bit deeper cut, or funding that a little quicker, you might have seen the revenue growth that those tax cuts spurned, But, I think, again, it's a good first shot, and
Sure.
I think that it will be looked at and tweaked over time. I do think that with a tax cut, I think one thing they were a little short on was some spending cuts. I think that the state could look at some more efficiencies, how they're funding budgets. We're going to go back to the education budget. The allocation to a regent university is staggering to me versus some K through 12 education. And is that 57% of the budget needed? I don't know. Could you reallocate some of those funds and then roll back some overfunded items in that budget? I think that you could, as one example. So, I think there's other budgets that could use a little looking at and some efficiencies for sure.
Okay, so how would you answer this question? Does Iowa have a revenue problem or a spending problem?
Well, I think Iowa has a spending problem.
Okay.
And I think if we would cut back some spending and give, nobody spends their money better than themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Giving an individual control over what they want to purchase, and if they're in a stable situation and a stable economy, people are going to spend and bring in the revenue that is needed. When you don't know what a state government's going to do or a federal government's going to do, you don't spend because are my taxes going up? Are they not? Am I going to make this? What are my quarterly payments going to be? You just shut down your spending because you're just waiting to see what tax you're gonna what you got to pay that first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of controversy has been talked about at the 99% rule. So, just because there is a 99% rule, does the state have to spend to that 99% rule?
Right.
Yeah. I think in this tax cut, they said, well, we spent to 98%. Well, that's better.
Right.
But maybe is it enough?
And also, too, it depends. That 99%, the way the law is written right now, it's also based on the current way they estimate revenue, which
Correct.
You've already, acknowledged, and I agree is flawed. So good deal. Another question I like asking candidates. We have seen nationally, and even seen some instances in the state of Iowa, where we're seeing a kind of a conflict between sexual orientation and gender identity laws butt up against religious liberty and religious freedom of conscience of citizens. How do you think the state of Iowa should, on one hand, make sure that Iowans are not discriminated against, but on the other hand, make sure that Iowans' religious liberty and freedom of conscience is protected as well?
Right. So everybody has their liberties as they see it. Certainly I don't think anybody is coming out for discrimination or advocating discrimination. People that choose same-sex marriage have the right to do that. They're citizens. They can have the right to do that if the state supports that. My belief is, in traditional marriage, by definition, is a man and a woman. And so I think maybe what you're maybe getting at was the baking of the cake baker that got fined and whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm a private business owner.
Okay.
And as a private business owner, I think I have rights to pick and choose, what services I'm going to deliver and whom I'm going to deliver those to. There are some private business owners that have zero problem making the cake for the same-sex couple. There are other businesses, because of their religious, beliefs, don't want to bake the cake. And I think that they're well within their rights to be able to make that decision.
Okay. So would you support like a Religious Freedom Restoration Act? There was a bill that unfortunately didn't make it past funnel that basically provided Iowans a pathway for legal defense should a complaint be filed against them with the Iowa Civil Rights Commission.
I think without looking at the bill and knowing the details of it, just your general statement would be something that I would definitely look at.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't allow discrimination, but it provides
right. And I think that's the key. I think we're not promoting discrimination, or everybody has the right to their, as I said, their own decision. But a private business owner also has the right to their own decision also.
Right.
And I think as long as it's respectful and not malicious, or I think they have the right to make their decision for their business.
Great. Last question. It's kind of a two-tiered one. A simple part of it is, where can people learn more about your campaign? And then the second thing is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up?
Okay. So Sheila Matheney has a Facebook page, so we can access that easily. And then I also have a website. It's Sheila, SHEILA Matheney. It's MATHENEY.wen.gop. I think my Facebook page does link you to that. It's got my bio, my bio on that. It's got some campaign events and that type of thing. The one thing that is a big deal for our campaign is healthcare.
Okay.
And we didn't have a chance to talk about that, but just, quickly, healthcare is a very important subject to me. I think with the MCO process and the privatization of Medicaid, it's really has put a lot of providers and constituents into a situation that hasn't been the most positive. Mm-hmm. And so just quickly, I, feel like the system can be fixed, and I feel like both sides need to work together. It's a both Democratic and Republican issue. Yeah. And I feel like that can be fixed. It's an important issue. If it can't be fixed, then we need to look at how we're going to replace that, because it's not doing anybody a whole lot of good in the current system that it's in. Okay. But it seems like there is an appetite to fix it. The other thing I would like to say quickly is I really would like to, I was a little leery about becoming a candidate. It's been a very enjoyable experience, and I just would like to thank family and friends that have really gone out of their way to support us. So just want to express appreciation for that.
All right. Well, hey, Sheila, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And
not a problem.
Best of luck to you next week. And,
thank you.
And if you happen to win the nomination, I'm sure we'll try to have you back on before the general election.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Hey, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that concludes today's episode of the Caffeinated Thoughts Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you happen to be listening to this podcast somewhere other than on our website, please be sure to check out caffeinatedthoughts.com. Again, that's caffeinatedthoughts.com. Or Google Caffeinated Thoughts and it'll show up at the top of your search screen. Also, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, sign up for our emails. That way you don't miss a single article. Until next time, my friends, this is Shane Vander Hart. Have a great weekend. Take care.